Phyllida Lloyd is the director of the new film Herself, which stars Claire Dunn as a single mother who decides to build a house after dealing with the broken housing system in Ireland. I'm Kevin Jacobson of Gold Derby here with Phyllida, and this is actually your first film since The Iron Lady that you've directed. What was it about this story that just made you want to take that leap again?
So I'd been looking for a more indie movie to do for several years, actually. It seems kind of weird. And most people are trying to get bigger and bigger budgets, but I was somehow I'd had such a curious start to my movie career, and I'd been trying actually to get down, as I saw it, down to sort of be able to work perhaps in the way I'd been working in the theatre, which was more kind of social mission driven. In fact, Harriet Walter, who plays Peggy, and Claire Dunn and myself were all, since 2012, we were part of a all-female Shakespeare troupe that we were working a lot in the criminal justice system, and we were all very preoccupied by domestic abuse and the number of women who'd come into jail as a result of a childhood in domestic abuse. So we were all about, unheard voices. And I guess I wanted to somehow make my next step back into the movie world more in that realm. And I had this hunch that it might suit me better, and that I could work more in the way that I do in the theatre, in a more, with a smaller unit, a more collaborative approach. Then Claire sat down one day and started writing her first screenplay, gave it to me just as a friend, what do you think? Give me some feedback. I was immediately struck by how, you've read the story of the battered woman before, seen the movie possibly of that, but I realized immediately, and of course it should have been no surprise because of the women that we were talking to, but that Claire was actually addressing not just, those of us lucky enough to feel safe in our homes who might advocate for social change, but she's actually talking to the women themselves as well, and saying, maybe there's more hope than you might think at the moment if you take that step across the threshold away from an abusive partner. So I was really struck by the kind of the light and shade, the sense of this woman not being a victim, being really a kind of agent of her own destiny. Yes, luck comes to her. Luck that some people might go, well, that's never going to happen. But somehow, I don't know, in this changed world, notwithstanding how the economic divide between people is even greater than it ever was, still crazy things can happen, and acts of kindness that we've heard about, can occur. So I was really struck by the distinctive tone of it. It was very funny. Claire's a very funny person. It had a lot of it was a roller coaster. It had a sort of undertow of thriller about it. It was like, oh my God, she's having all this community's building around her. She's having this success building this house, but Jesus, there's this sort of almost like Jaws undertow to this, where is this guy going to come? Is this guy going to undermine her, bring her down? So it had a lot of ingredients that I felt were really compelling, and just a very distinctive tone of its own.
Yeah, absolutely. And with Claire Dunn as the star, and also having ownership of the story as a screenwriter, what was the collaborative process on set where she's created this story, but is also trusting you to kind of guide her through that as an actress?
Yeah, I mean, I think that by the time we got to shooting it, she was the actress, and I was the director. And as you as a director, you have to kind of really own by then the screenplay. You have to be able to go, you know, afraid we're going to cut that part because it's not working. We're going to improvise that. The children can't make it their own. But fundamentally, there was so much shorthand between us. We'd done, you know, we'd been round the world with this, where she and Harriet Walter had been playing husband and wife and father and son and warrior enemies, you know, in the theatre, and I was working with them both in you know, content that was at least as extreme and harrowing as what was in her screenplay. So there was a real, I would say, trust between us. So on set, there was, we were both able to turn our attention to the others. I mean, it was really the challenge was, we had that quite diverse community, some of whom were not professional actors. We had children, and so we were able to work with shorthand between us, and then look outside our, you know, her, beyond her, to how to make that ensemble. And of course, I was hell bent on, I knew what Claire was capable of, and I wanted that sort of stripped bare, no artifice, no acting. I wanted that from everyone else as well. And I knew Harriet was capable of it. But how to get that from the kids, especially on the 10th take, you know, how to get that freshness. That was where my sort of director actor energy and skill was focused. I mean, obviously I was kind of, you know, there'd be moments when I'd be pushing Claire to go further or hold back, or, you know, I was just working with her as I always did, trying to help her give her best.
Yeah, and there are a few scenes in the film that are quite harrowing, that involve physical abuse and emotional abuse, for that matter.
Yeah.
How did you go about approaching those more delicate scenes, like the one at the very beginning?
Yeah.
Is definitely,
So
yeah,
in the on the metaphorical cutting room floor, there is a huge scene, a lengthy scene of horrifying abuse, which I shot not knowing how much of it I was going to use. But we shot the full horror of Gary determining to kind of almost eclipse her at the moment she decided to leave him. But Ian and Claire, again, they worked together in the theatre, and like a lot of these things of sort of smoke and mirrors, that was very practically worked out. Once we decided what actually Gary might try to do to her and how it would start. And so once he started to do what he started to do and Claire tried to escape, you know, we worked out a very choreographed, you know, it's such a practical thing, making something like that, in order not to, you know, get in the wrong position for the camera. And when I cut it together, I was like, okay, we're not going to need all this, because the audience are going to bring a lot of this to the screen themselves. They know by implication. And also, and this was one of the big journeys of the edit, what I decided to leave out in terms of her post-traumatic stress, and that it was a journey of almost like recovery of memory, that, you know, there comes that point in the film where she remembers what her child saw. And therefore these, it's like this kind of, it's like a jack in the box, almost like the post-traumatic stress, beating the lid open, and then these flashes come out, and then eventually it's as if she's got the strength to kind of just open up to remembering what happened. So it was about very much showing less, just enough, but not too much. And the combination of the visuals and how that was scored was particularly sort of, Rebecca Lloyd, the editor, we went on quite a long journey. And I would say the journey was of like refining it down to something quite economical.
Yeah,
The
absolutely.
children, sorry, then there were,
No, go
there
ahead.
was scenes that the children had to play the distress as well. And that's, they just were very remarkable kids. And when I felt I'd got to the bottom of what they could give, either through exhaustion or, they're only allowed to work certain hours a day, then you go, okay, how to construct the illusion of the pain that they're suffering. So they were, but they were very beautiful, natural listeners. They listened, didn't matter how many takes I did, they still listened as if they'd never heard it before, which of course is, the essence of acting. And I often, if I felt they were kind of finding a little bit of text, a little bit of script, kind of a bit clunky, I would literally get them to improvise. And I set up a lot of those, stuff with the Wendy house, or I'd give them sticks and say, look, what about we build a fairy house here? And then I just wound them up and off they went into their kind of fairyland of their own. And then I just got the camera with Tom and we followed them. So there were, and that whole world of the mehel, the community on the building site, there was a lot of improvisation amongst them. There, it's a cliche to say the crack, as we call it, CRAIC, Irish wit, but a couple of extremely witty characters in there who, we'd set up these working parties of them, and the cracks would be flying, and we'd just let them chatter on. So it was always about trying to create something everywhere that was as truthful as what Claire was doing, because she literally was, it was like she knew this character in her guts. I mean, her mother is a cleaner, so she based her working world on her mum. Her friend had become homeless. The whole thing was constructed from the deepest part of her. And so I was determined that everyone else around could rise to that level of no acting, and Harriet, I knew, could do that. Conleth, I knew from work of his I'd seen, and he was also crucial. He helped me on the building site. I mean, Conleth can't even barely hammer in a nail or put up a shelf himself, but he said he could definitely act, that he could. And so he was, again, it was about the community. It was about the community on the movie set that really was a mirror of the community that was the fictional community.
Yeah, and you can absolutely feel that community. I was going to definitely ask you about just with all the the volunteers that are helping Sandra. I'm wondering how much that atmosphere that feels so natural to the how much that extended to the actual shooting of the film, where you're also working with a smaller budget and you're starting small, but then here you are building this thing together. It's almost on a meta level.
Yeah, no, definitely. And even another meta level was that Claire and I, a year before, I booked us on a course to go and learn how to build a timber framed house. So we went off to Wales with a load of guys and lived in cabins and learnt how to use extreme power tools and to do, become very proficient at sawing and constructing and lifting and working in teams and stuff that really fed into my sense of how I was going to plan that. And we, of course, because everybody was really using dangerous tools, we had to rehearse and we had to train with our construction crew. And so again, there's a lot of banter and a lot of help me with this, and and me setting up situations and then working my way around with Tom, the DP, following what people were doing, where they really were drilling and hammering and sawing and yes, it was meta. It was, and I think that there was, Dublin is a small city. Claire's well known as a theatre actress, and everybody knew that she hadn't had a break on screen. You know, she has that very distinctive birthmark on her eye. And if she'd been a bloke, a man, you know, she'd have been hired in God knows what movies. But I don't think it helped her get work. And that was one of the things when she presented me with this screenplay and said she wasn't actually necessarily going to play Sandra. She was just in her classic humility. Um, she had written herself a little tiny role as a sister. And so it wasn't till I heard someone say, you know, Claire's written an incredible role for a great, great movie actress. And I was like, yeah, her. And this was before I'd actually knew I was going to be directing. I was like, yeah, she's written it for herself, you know, just in case any of you here are under any illusion. And it was at that point I was like, I am going to direct this and I'm going to make this happen. So going back to the meta, the community, Claire was known in the city as a theatre actress, but everybody was like, oh my God, Claire's written a script, you know, and so everybody was, and I was able to, you know, we had a 50-50 gender split on the unit, which created a kind of karma, very distinctive karma. And I feel that, you know, how you work is as kind of critical as the work you do, that you can actually really change the culture by creating a workplace that's has a particular code in terms of just human relations. So it was a really good vibe. And of course it was traumatic. You know, you've got no time. I mean, there's never any time, whether you've got $50 million or three, but somehow there's a special no time when you're trying to also build a house and you've got 5 weeks to shoot it. And I'd sort of brought the budget down in order that I could have the freedom, even more freedom, to cast who I wanted and have absolutely, because there was a moment where, you know, yes, you're going to cast Claire as Sandra, so we better have a star playing Peggy. And I was like, oh no, because we've got to make this about, you know, this is about her. And I don't want to go into that thing where you can spot it in movies where you think, yeah, this was about that, but what, you know, and then there's this other looming large sort of supporting character played by somebody really famous. And I felt that was wrong for the film. And so in order to give myself the freedom, yeah, I think the producers were like, they did question me several times ago, are you sure you're okay with this? And I was like, you know, everything crossed, let's just do it. And I had a brilliant DP, Tom Comerford, who, you know, saved me from the worst of myself, but went with my sort of, I had a very clear idea of how I wanted to shoot it. I was going to stay close to Claire. I was going to enter the room with her. I was going to leave the room with her. What happened when she wasn't in the room was not our business. I was going to try and, do quite a few scenes in single develop. Sorry, this is a bit too much information, but you're Kevin Jacobson, so you are going to kind of be interested, I hope. But you know, where we shot,
not gonna lie, I am. Go ahead.
You know, do single shots and try and develop shots and cover some scenes in one shot. And of course you think, people say, oh, that's very economical. And you think, yeah, it isn't really, because it takes 5 times as long to do that, especially when you've got kids who precision choreography. And but yeah, it was a really, for me, I felt I was much more in my element maybe than on a bigger scale thing. I felt more, it suited maybe me more.
Yeah, that's incredible. And the film has also just been a big critical success. The audience at Sundance seemed to really love it, from what I understand. And I want to just congratulate you on that. We're out of time now, but I want to congratulate you on that, as well as your recent Tony nomination for the Tina Turner musical. So having a big year for yourself. So congrats on both of those projects.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate
Yeah.
it. Thanks.
Absolutely. And thank you for talking to me today as well.
Okay. Cheers.
Um,
Thanks.
for those of for those of you watching, hit like and subscribe for more interviews, and head to goldderby.com to make your awards season predictions.